Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. I absolutely love creating Christmas cards. So when I saw this Holiday Florals Glimmer plate from Spellbinders, I knew I absolutely had to create something with it. It has the corner glimmer plate as well as 3 different plates for sentiments with it. You can use all of them or you can use a different sentiment. I chose to use the Merry Christmas with this one, but you could also use the other ones with it as well. I'm also choosing to do it twice on this background. I'm doing the foiling on Hammer Mill cardstock, and I'm using my favorite foil, which is Prism foil. It has an iridescence to it that I absolutely love. I've got my Glimmer Machine heated up and ready to go, and I'm putting my layer on my Glimmer Machine with the plate side down and the pretty side of the foil facing the plate. I'm using Hammer Mill cardstock. It's the best one that I've found for doing hot foiling. After I have it off here, I'm going to leave it for a few seconds off screen, and then I'm going to reposition and tape the plate and redo that same process. So I'm putting the plate side down on my Glimmer Machine, pressing the timer button, and once that timer button stops flashing, it's ready to go into my Big Shot machine. If you've never done hot foiling before, you need the Glimmer Machine for the heat, and you need a die cutting machine for the pressure, and I'm using my Big Shot machine with this. And once again, after putting it through the Big Shot machine, I'm going to let it sit aside for it to cool for a little bit. Just that hot foil plate gets quite warm, so I don't want to be messing around with the tape while that plate is still quite hot. While waiting for it to cool, I'm going to warm up my solid hot foil plate. I always like to do the negative image as well. Often I'll use it to die cut sentiments or use it as a background or something, but you might as well use up that excess foil rather than waste it. And look at the gorgeous background that plate creates. I absolutely love it. There's a tiny little bit of overfoiling on one of the leaves, but that is it, and I'm actually going to leave it because unless I point it out right there, you wouldn't even notice it was there. So once I have my solid piece done, I'm going to put my machines away, and I'm going to put that piece away. I'll use it on a future project. I'm not using it on this one here. I just like to do it at the same time while the machine is heated up. Might as well get it done and use up that foil rather than trying to store that piece of foil. But it does create a beautiful background there. Not sure what I'm going to do with it at this point, but it'll be a future project. Now that background could be left as is, but I decided I wanted to color it, and I love at Christmas time to see unique colors for poinsettias, so I'm doing this one in blue. I've got 3 different distress pad colors here. I'm using Stormy Sky, Faded Jeans, and Chip Sapphire, and then I'm going to use Bundled Sage and Peeled Paint for some of the greenery. I'm coloring them in with some detailed ink blending brushes, and I've got the smallest brush here, and for the lightest color, I'm working from the tip towards the center of the flower. I want to make sure to get some color in there, and I want to also have the control with my brush, and if I'm working from the center out, which is how I normally work, I won't have that control at the end of the petal. So by doing it from the outside in, just for that particular color, I can make sure it gets colored, but I don't have to risk going outside the lines. Once that one is done, I'm going to work with my middle color, which is the Faded Jeans, and I'm just going from the center out, and then after that I'm going to go with this Chip Sapphire with another detailed blending brush and really get some of the shading in. So I'm going to do some shading around the center of the flower as well as where each petal goes behind the other. There would be a natural shadow there, so I want to be able to highlight each of the petals, and by adding that shading behind there, we can do that. Now these petals or these flowers, poinsettias, could be done in any colors. I love seeing the unique colors, but you could absolutely do this in traditional colors as well, and it would be stunning. I really love the blues with this Prism foil because the Prism kind of has a bit of a blue, pink, green tone to it, or shimmer to it, that really is nice with the blues, which is one of the reasons why I chose it for this one. Once we have all of the detail from this poinsettia, I have a time lapse for the next part, and it's going to do that same process for all of the poinsettia. I'll be doing the lightest color from the tip of the petal to the center, and then choosing the middle color or the medium color and going from the center outwards, and then using the darkest color and putting those shadows behind each and every one of those petals. Man, don't we wish we could work this fast? This would be great. Now, if you've never used distress inks before, they're just a dye-based ink, and any dye-based ink would work for this. It doesn't need to be distress ink. It's just the one that I have the most colors of, and I like to use it. I'm very familiar with it, but any dye-based ink would work. I like using the dye-based ink for this because it won't stick to the foil. Now that my poinsettias are done, I'm doing the same thing with the greenery. I'm starting with the light, and then I'm going in and using the dark one on some of the other leaves. Once I was done with the inking, there are some berries on this image. Some of them are open and some of them are foiled. So on the foiled berries, I put some Glossy Accents, and on the open berries, I put some Silver Nouveau drops. The Glossy Accents on the foiled berries look almost like little iridescent prisms. It's beautiful. I let that dry completely, and then I trimmed it down for the front of the card. I took the blue color, the navy color that I'm using as a matte for my image, and I'm foiling the Merry Christmas sentiment on it. I'm using the same foil, and I'm doing the same process as I did when I foiled the background image, the poinsettia image. So I have everything taped in place. This just ensures that nothing's going to shift on me. I've got my platform warm and ready to go. Foil, the plate is facing the Glimmer Machine, and then the foil, the pretty side, is facing the plate, and then I've got the cardstock up with my plates on top. And then once that platform is done, once my timer button has stopped, I put it through my Big Shot machine for the pressure. Let that cool for a few minutes and then take it off. There's a tiny little bit of overfoiling there, and you could, if that bothered you, you could use a sand eraser to erase it off, but it's so minimal that I think I'm the only one that would actually notice it. So I left it there just because sometimes the sand eraser can dull some of the foil, and I didn't want to risk that. So because this particular plate doesn't have a die to it, I am fussy cutting around the edges. I use my mini trimmer to make a nice straight edge on the bottom. And then I'm just using some Cutter Bee scissors to fussy cut around there. I definitely prefer a die cut for cutting out sentiments, but if there's not one, this is the next best thing. I tried to get as close or as even a border around it as possible. And then once I'm completely done, I'm going to use some foam tape to put it on that card base. I want it to have a little bit of extra dimension to it, but I also don't want to take multiple pieces of cardstock and fussy cut this multiple times, because I don't think I'd be able to get it as nice and even as if it was die cut layering on top of each other. I'm using foam tape to put it on there just to give that some more dimension to it. I like it when it pops out a little bit. And as I'm laying it here, I'm thinking I like it, but it seems like it's missing something. So while I'm thinking about it, I'm going to assemble my card. I'm just using some Distress Collage medium to assemble everything together. And I like to put an acrylic block on the layers and hold them in place while I have my hands free to glue the next layer down. I like using the Distress Collage medium because it dries completely matte and it dries completely clear. So if I happen to overglue and I get a little bit seeping out, you're never going to even know that it's there. You could also use foam pop dots instead of these foam strips here. This is just what I had that had the right thickness that I was wanting for this particular piece. But either way, it's going to help just give it a little bit of extra dimension. So after just assembling it to this point, I decided to take this Christmas Blooms die set and die cut some of the poinsettias as well as some of the greenery with coordinating cardstock scraps. This die set has 15 different dies in the set, and they're not big. You can tell by the comparison to my thumb. So it's not going to take away from that glimmered or that foiled background. And this is a great way to use up die cut or cardstock scraps because a lot of these dies are so small that it takes up little pieces. It's good use for them. So I'm taking my Big Shot machine and I'm just die cutting a whole bunch of them. I want to make sure to have a lot of choice when I go to assemble them to the front of the card. And I just put a couple on there just to see if I'm going to like how it looks, and I think I'm going to like it. Once I have a bunch of these pieces die cut, I'm taking the same Distress ink colors that I used before and I'm inking my poinsettias up. And then I'm going to use the same greens that I used before and I'm going to ink up my greenery. For the poinsettias, I'd use the same detailed ink blending brush. And then for my greenery, I took a bigger blending brush and I'm just inking it up and swiping it from the bottom of the die cut up. I have my finger holding the stem of the die cut so it doesn't get inked, but you're never going to know because it's going to be in the center of the cluster. It's going to be completely hidden. But this is just going to give it a little bit of dimension, just the color. that actually really you're probably not even going to see, but I just think it makes a difference. With the poinsettias, I like to use my fingers to curl the petals a little bit just to give them a little bit of extra dimension. And I also like to use 2 of the big die cuts offset from each other and then glue one of the small ones in the center. You could use 2 if you want, but I don't think it's really necessary. I'm using the same Distress Collage medium to glue them together. And then I'm taking my die pick and I'm holding the stack for a few seconds just to let that glue set for a moment to hold all those pieces together. And then I'm going to let them dry completely. In the center of the poinsettias, I'm going to put one of these iridescent crystal drops from Pinkfresh Studios. It's going to tie in with those berries that have the glossy accents on top of it. The iridescence is very similar and it just looked really pretty with those berries, and I thought it would look pretty in the center of the flowers. You could also use those same Silver Nouveau drops that I used on the other berries on the background as well if you didn't have these drops. It ties in the background and either one would really work. Once I have everything inked and assembled, I'm using Distress Collage medium to glue these in place, and I'm just arranging them as I'm going. I use the Distress Collage medium for this, especially because if I decide I don't want something there or I want to move it a little bit, it makes it easy to do. So I don't like to use tape or permanent adhesive when I'm doing this. The Distress Collage medium is a little bit more forgiving. Any other liquid glue that you like to use with card making would work probably as well. This is just the one that I like to use. I like it because it sets fairly quickly as well. But I do have a little bit of wiggle room time. Once I have my arrangement all set, I'm going to let that dry completely. And then my card is pretty much done. But I don't want to move and shuffle everything around while that glue is still wet. But I love the extra texture and dimension that those die cuts added to that card, and I don't think it takes away from that foiled and inked background. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. I hope you have a fantastic day.